So let's get to the stimulus. I want to talk about the stimulus bill. And here it is. So this was from when it passed the Senate. Politico did a article on it. Senate passes $484 billion coronavirus deal after weeks of deadlock. Schumer responded that the legislation is significantly better and broader than McConnell's bill by catering to businesses without access to large financial institutions and providing more health care money than Republicans initially sought. The legislation includes $321 billion for the depleted Paycheck Protection Program, of which $60 billion is set aside for underbanked businesses, a priority for Democrats. Because the first one they passed, none of the money got to small businesses or people who really need it. So the $5 trillion bill, that didn't really help anybody. That all went into the pockets of the oligarchs who were about to buy up the rest of the country at fire sale prices. Okay. The deal also includes $60 billion in loans and grants for economic disaster assistance, $75 billion for hospitals, and $25 billion for the coronavirus testing. Of that testing money, $11 billion will go to states, and some will also go to the federal government. When you look at the package that's going to be passed, it's almost exactly like the one we asked for 2 weeks ago. Who said that? House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer said that. So the bill that's passing is almost exactly like the one they asked for 2 weeks ago. So 2 weeks ago, you weren't at. So I'm going to tell you what's not in this bill. What's not in this bill is health care for people during the middle of a pandemic. What's not in there is direct cash payments to people while the government tells them that their businesses are closed. Okay? Those two things, not in the bill. Credit card relief, not in the bill. Rent relief, not in the bill. These are things that people want and need right now. Not in the bill. And you wrote this 2 weeks ago, and 2 weeks go by, and there's still none of that stuff in the bill? What are the Democrats? Let's just finish this. All right, so that's it. That's real. So here's what happened in the $484 bill. $310 billion for paychecks protection, $60 billion for small businesses, $75 for hospitals, $25 for corona testing. And Michael Grunwald says Democrats cave. Nothing for states or cities, nothing's for election protection or the post office, no oversight still, no limits on fossil fuel bailouts, no food stamps. They got some testing. Somehow that's a GOP concession, but no contact tracing. So Republicans say, hey, here's exactly what we want. And Democrats go, can we add some stuff that you're not opposed to? Republicans go, sure, whatever. Democrats, we won. They didn't put anything in that bill that the Republicans were opposed to. What do you say to this bill, Danny Haiphong from the Black Agenda Report?
It's complete garbage. I mean, it's an insult in a lot of ways because, yeah, working people absolutely got nothing out of this bill. It was actually the media attention around it just prior to it passing was very quaint and silent and not really effectual because I think both political parties and the corporate media knew that it was going to have very little impact. I mean, $10-11 billion for testing nationwide where what are we 8 weeks into
right.
The pandemic spread in the United States, and now we find out likely a lot longer that we just didn't know about. So that pittance for testing, that pittance for hospital and healthcare, it just shows that the ruling class and both political parties have no interest in addressing the pandemic crisis in a serious way at all. That actually healthcare workers can go die, essential workers, quote unquote, they can die too. And we'll have that 100,000 number, I believe, in terms of deaths to the coronavirus because of actions just like this.
It's coming. You're right.
Yeah. just because there absolutely is no response. This is not a response. This is just keeping the status quo going in a time that demands a lot more.
And what do you say to the fact that Bernie voted for this?
It's just another vote in a long pattern of capitulation to the party elite and the capitalist class. This is a guy who claims to be a democratic socialist, who says alongside the squad that they are for a real socialist transformation here in the United States that meets the needs of working people. But when you vote for bills like this without so much of a protest, and not even telling your followers and those who support you that a lot more needs to be done now, and how are you going to help me do more to make sure that this vote just doesn't get through? That's never in the conversation.
Never.
It's always, we have to go on to the next bill and on to the next bill. It's all just classic bourgeois politics here in the United States. The two-party system has the complete control over what goes on here politically, policy-wise, economically, and Bernie Sanders is showing that he actually doesn't have any power on his own, and he's not willing to use his mass base to ensure that his political positions and his fight back is effectual. I think that's what this really shows, that he doesn't think with that kind of foresight. He thinks more about falling back on the Democratic Party elite and this so-called partisan game that's being played, when in fact it's a one-party state and there's a bipartisan consensus on austerity and war in a time of a pandemic.
It's amazing that we're in a pandemic. This is now the fourth bill to address the pandemic. None of them have addressed the pandemic. Not one has addressed the effects on people from the pandemic. No, nothing for health care, right? Nothing for a UBI direct payment. The government tells you you can't go to work, and then they don't give you money. That is unbelievable. Yet they give $5 trillion to the guys who don't need the money so they can buy up all the properties and assets while they're suppressed and during a depression because the government just caused it by telling everybody that has to close down. It's amazing. The Democrats have a new nickname. It's called origami because everything they do involves folding. Am I right, Danny? Come on. The Democrats are what happens if people who fall for Craigslist scams are given positions of power. That's exactly. So this guy says, I hate these hot takes. The primary goal is to get testing and support for hospitals for now. But there is still going to be greater pressure in 3 months where they are going to have to pass another spending bill, and then we might be in a better position to negotiate. It's got fucking almost 300 likes. And this guy says, patience, folks. 1 or 2 more icebergs, and we'll have the leverage needed to get more lifeboats on the Titanic. Can you believe people still think like this? In the middle of a screwing, in the middle of a pandemic, they haven't given you one thing to address the healthcare problem in a pandemic. And this guy's like, don't worry, it's coming. It's coming. They have to give everything in the house, every asset we possibly have to the richest people in the country, and then they're going to give you healthcare in the middle of a pandemic. Go ahead. Do you have anything to say to that?
That's the story of neoliberal capitalism. That's what we've heard for so many decades, is that we can just wait and wait and wait for social change, for the things that we need, healthcare, housing, jobs. All the while, all of those things are being taken right out from under us, that the austerity continues, the privatization continues. I mean, even in a pandemic, what do we have? We have the United States building military bases in Syria, sending warships to the South China Sea. We have warships being sent off the coast of Venezuela. There's never any austerity for war. There's never any austerity for the profits of the rich. It's all about taking things away from us that we need, and we're told over and over to wait for it. And actually, the Democratic Party takes the lead in that charge, because what the Republican Party has done is they've become the white man's party over the last 40 years. All they talk about is how to serve their corporate donors, and then they throw dog whistles of racism towards certain sections of the population. And the Democrats say, well, everyone else, wait and see. Workers, wait and see. Black folks, wait and see. Undocumented people, wait and see. We're going to take this so-called incremental approach, which a lot of progressives talk about that as being somehow better. But it's not incrementalism if everything is on a downward trend. So that, I believe, has always been just a vicious lie. And this is what folks like that defend and prop up at any moment and at any time when things couldn't be any worse at this given moment. But yet we're supposed to wait and see for the next time that the Democratic Party supposedly is supposed to have a solution for us.
Well, here's what. So if you don't know what's happening, if you haven't been watching the show, is that the Congress and the president and the Democrats and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Bernie Sanders have decided to give trillions of dollars to the richest corporations in the country who don't need it. Instead of getting health care to people in the middle of a pandemic, and instead of giving direct cash payments to people who need it, instead of canceling credit card debt or rent payments, or instead of doing any of that stuff, they're just giving money to rich people. They're not, and they're not doing anything. In fact, and now minutes after the Senate passed the package, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin said he expects this to be the last wave of payments to small businesses. So if you know what happened, almost all the money that they allotted went to the richest people, not small businesses, because what do they really want to happen? They don't even like the middle class. They want the richest oligarchs to be able to pounce on the small businesses and buy them up at fire sale prices. That's what's happening right now. That's why they didn't fund small businesses in the first goddamn place. This is the fourth stimulus bill. They're finally getting around to putting some money, giving it to small businesses, which probably won't get to them again. And I just want to let you know, this passed on a voice vote. What do you have to say about that, Danny?
Well, in my time in quarantine here in the highly infected New York City area, I just finished rereading the Communist Manifesto. And what the Communist Manifesto says, Karl Marx and Frederick Engels, good friends, they said that the capitalist class, the ruling class at a certain stage of capitalism, attacks the so-called small businesses and the so-called middle class and turns them into workers, just like the rest of us. And that is exactly what is happening right now during this pandemic. And when I think about this stimulus and when I think about all of the so-called stimulus bills over the past month or so, is that New York City especially is going to be hit hard because New York City is an extremely expensive place to have any kind of business, let alone a small business. And there have been businesses on my block, in neighborhoods across this city that have been closed for over a month. And without any support, those businesses are likely going to be bought up by private equity firms, and they're not going to stand a chance to live and exist. So New York City is going to look a lot different. Cities across this country are going to look a lot different because of this. And corporations like BlackRock and the like are going to run away with massive profits. They already are, just on the fact that these executives, they don't work. That's another thing about capitalism. Capitalism leeches off of workers, makes profits off of workers, and those that accumulate the profits, they don't work at all. And right now, they're literally being pumped full of trillions of dollars just to sit around and watch as all of us suffer from not only the pandemic, but the economic conditions that we've been forced to live under because of all of these restrictions we have to take. And there's just no support, and there's just such a high level of institutional neglect.
Hey, this is the part where I tell you where our live shows are, but there aren't any. And then I would tell you to go join our premium, but nobody has a fucking job. So why don't you just enjoy the video?